everybody. This is Echoes of War. I'm Craig from the Pacific War Channel, joined here by Gaurav, my co-host. How are you?
Hey Greg, great to be back here and looking forward to continuing our favorite World War II series.
For those of you who didn't see the first episode, this is kind of a two-parter. The first episode covered the actual invasion of Sicily, whereas this episode is going to be the conquest, the end of the campaign. But before we jump into it, if you'd like to support the channel, please consider checking out the YouTube membership or my Patreon account at www.patreon.com/the Pacific War Channel. By joining either of these, you get access to the exclusive podcast series, early access to all the content I make, and voting rights for the subjects I will tackle next. And I'll just say it here, we recently released the latest episode for the exclusive podcast series, and that's going to be on the government by assassination. So that's Japan in the 1920s and 1930s, and it's a bunch of radical young Japanese army officers just killing every high official they wanted to get their agenda put forward. It's a pretty insane episode. But stating all of that, I think it's only right to try and give some context for those of you who might have not seen the first episode. So, Gaurav, maybe you could explain a bit as to why we are in Sicily.
Sure. So I think let's take back to 1943 start. We've had the disaster at Stalingrad. By the early part of the year, North Africa has surrendered to the Anglo-American forces. And through these two, while the Germans kind of stabilized the situation in the east with Manstein's victory at the Third Battle of Kharkov, the Germans have taken a significant beating. About 250,000 men surrender in North Africa and are captured from the Axis forces. The German Sixth Army is annihilated at Stalingrad, which at the start of 1942 was the single largest German army out there. So it's a pretty big blow. The Russians have been getting a lot of supplies from the British and Americans. America's war economy is now kicking into full gear. I think this is like most seen and most exemplified in the Pacific War, I might add, with the number of carriers coming in. But I digress. So the Casablanca conference also was to dictate strategy. Now, Stalin's only demand at the conference was, guys, open a second front. I want you to draw away divisions from the Soviet armies. The Americans wanted, all right, it's Germany first. Let's use Britain as a launch pad, land in France or the Pas de Calais, and just go straight for Germany and knock them out. The British did not want that, so they actually outmaneuvered the Americans, like, in a military dialogue. And the invasion of Sicily was proposed. And that is also called the soft underbelly of Europe by Winston Churchill. The idea was that Sicily will allow the Mediterranean to completely open to shipping. The British already control Gibraltar, Malta, and Alexandria, but if they conquer and capture Sicily, station Allied air forces there, the Mediterranean is theirs. There's absolutely no threat to them. And they believed that Germany would draw away divisions from the Eastern Front to counter the threat because they knew about the paranoia that Hitler did have about his exposed southern flank. And they also felt that the Italians are already wavering in their morale. So a strong show of force on their homeland will definitely, turn them against their allies and knock them out of the war, which is actually something that even the Germans expected as well. So the promise of drawing away divisions kind of like convinced Stalin to back this proposal. And the British also gave the guarantees to the Americans that the cross-channel invasion would take place in 1944. Now, as the armies of the US and Brits, which was the British Eighth Army and the US Army under General George Patton, are training, we also have some ruses that take place. The most notable being Operation Mincemeat, where there was a fake body that washed up on the coast of Spain, where the Germans intercepted it, and it mostly reinforced Hitler's belief that Sicily is just going to be a feint. Sardinia and the Balkans are going to be the absolute, priority attacks. And to Hitler, that made sense because he said, well, our oil fields are there. They were definitely going to go there. And it would work because around 6, 7 divisions were diverted away from the Italian theater to the Balkans and Greece. I think the number of divisions that went to the Balkans increased from 8 to 18 divisions, and Greece also got 6 to 7 German divisions there, and they did absolutely nothing to participate in the battles. Then we have our invasion finally taking place in July. And first, after an intensive air campaign where the Allies have established air superiority over the island and surrounding waters, you have the paratroops dropping in from the United States and British armies because of the great fascination that the two forces had with paratroopers. And then you had the British and Americans landing in their respective beaches to secure the foothold so that they can begin their invasion. And there were like kind of quite a few mishaps or such with the paratroopers, given it was the first concentrated use of such units in battle. And the Allies never really studied the drawbacks that the German Fallschirmjäger experienced when they took retreat. But as you can see on the map that Craig is displaying,
Yeah, we should
the
just note
British.
to the audience. Well, just to give a little break here. We strongly promote a visual component to this. I would actually go as far as to say we're no longer doing podcasts. All these Echoes of War episodes are now more or less presentations. I wouldn't say it's like a full-blown YouTube video because we're not actually doing animation, but we're pulling up about 10 different maps. We're following the units. We can even write on these maps using just like silly Zoom functions and all that. We put up photos of all the generals that are put up here. So I really implore all of you who are on the audio podcast platforms, if you really, if you feel you could, please check us out on YouTube because it actually helps us a lot more. We're trying to grow, and it's a lot easier to grow on YouTube because of the algorithm over there where new audiences can find you. Whereas on podcast platforms, unless you guys are verbally telling your friends, it's really difficult to find new audience members. So again, just trying to push it. Check us out on YouTube.
Thanks, Craig. And yeah, I do think we really cover it well. But so the British were the responsible for the eastern half of the island with Syracuse, Catania, and the initial drive to Messina, with the Seventh Army playing a support role. Now, this obviously enraged the Seventh Army's commander, General George Patton, who believed that the British were doing everything to stifle the American war effort. But at the time of the planning, it made complete sense militarily to let the Eighth Army take the lead, given that they are experienced soldiers. They have experienced commanders, whereas the US are still quite green in combat. But, anyways, I think by the first couple of days of the operation, we've had, by 11th July, sorry, around 163,000 Allied soldiers had landed on the island. So it's a landing scale that's a proper dress rehearsal for Operation Overlord. So, Craig, maybe we can now dive deeper into the battle for Sicily.
Yeah, so I'm gonna keep up this map and I'm gonna keep the map as it looks right now in full and not put my ugly face over it because I also make a lot of clips for these podcasts that go out on various social media platforms. And I notice whenever we do podcasts, it actually really screws up the clipping because it gets confused between putting our faces up or putting maps up. So better put the map. But basically, yeah, as you mentioned, the amphibious assault has been largely successful. More or less, the southeastern part of Sicily is, in the Allied hands. But by July the 12th, the beachheads in southeastern Sicily were secured, prompting General Harold Alexander to plan for what is essentially dividing the island in two. The Allies aimed to advance northwards towards the coast while cutting off the east-west roadways. So if you're looking at this map, you can actually see the paths that both armies took, and it becomes quite obvious that they're using the main highways through Sicily to basically just divide the island east and west, with the Americans taking, the west and the British taking the east. On July the
I
13th,
would just add
yeah.
one thing because of the ruggedness of the Sicilian uh,
Mhm.
topography. there were very few usable roads, and Sicily was quite impoverished.
Yeah, it's very underdeveloped,
I
yeah.
mean, so there were just scattered towns on hilltops, open terrain, or hills. And as we approach the northern half, it's pretty much just all hills.
Yeah,
So
especially
given
Mount
the lack of
Rontana.
yeah, so given the lack of infrastructure, they actually just don't have much of a choice on how they would advance. Actually,
Yeah, it's basically a war over highways when you look at it because, like you said, the terrain is just far too hilly. And this is the Allies in 1943. They are vehicle heavy, unlike the Germans who are not so good when it comes to number of vehicles. Quality, very good. Quantity, not so good. But by July the 13th, Alexander is issuing orders to Montgomery for his advance, while Patton prepares to defend the left flank, which, Patton loved to be second fiddle to Montgomery. He was very happy about this. Meanwhile, General Field Marshal Albert Kesselring visited Sicily on the 12th, and he concluded that German troops were effectively fighting on their own, which is another way to say that the poor Italians were getting shit on again. Kesselring's strategy involved abandoning western Sicily and directing Axis units to execute delaying actions, allowing for the establishment of the new main defensive line stretching from Catania to San Stefano. Sicily was defended by two corps of the Italian Sixth Army, along with forces stationed at maritime military bases and fortresses in some key ports. The German forces would include the Hermann-Göring Panzer Division, the 15th Panzergrenadier Division, and elements from the 1st Parachute Division, 29th Panzergrenadier Division, and the 14th Panzer Corps headquarters. General Hans Valentin Hube commanded all the German sectors under Kesselring's oversight, while General Alfredo Gozzini was in charge of the Italian sectors, reporting to Vittorio Ambrosio. And at the outset, the Axis had about 400,000 troops, comprising 260 tanks, 200 artillery pieces, and about 1,400 aircraft. And I'll just say it right now. The Allies have like nearly 2,000 pieces of artillery, and that's going to basically decide most of this.
not to mention 14,000 vehicles of all types and over 800 tanks.
Oh, yeah. So at this point, the British 13th and 30th Corps are going to be advancing along the Catania Road and Route 124. Oberst Wilhelm Schmalz was leading a battle group in English, Kampfgruppe in German, to delay the British 5th Division, providing time for two regiments of the German 1st Parachute Division to drop and deploy at Catania, which, yeah, they're still throwing them parachute units out there into the fray. Meanwhile, the British 1st Parachute Brigade struggled to hold the Premzoli Bridge, suffering some heavy casualties from repeated attacks by the 10th Arditi Paratroop Regiment, the 372nd Coastal Battalion, and the 29th Artillery Group. Now, the Axis forces are utilizing some armored cars, and they nearly overrun the HQ of the 9th Battalion in the process. However, by the 15th, the British 5th Division managed to link up with their paratroopers, and by the 17th, they had established a shallow bridgehead north of the river. On the 16th, the surviving aircraft of the Regia Aeronautica withdrew to mainland Italy after they had just lost about 160 aircraft. And basically, this is during the amphibious assault when bombardments, from artillery, aerial, and even storming some of the airfields with infantry had taken a toll on them. That same
I
day,
would,
attack. Oh, yeah.
yeah, I was also going to add that this is by now even the Luftwaffe had also withdrawn as well.
Oh, yeah.
They were based in Naples and such, and the central, south central airfields had already been overrun, and work had began by the Seabees in getting these constructed and airworthy. Now, this is actually going to compromise the Axis air support so much, as it is a similar situation with the Battle of Britain, where the Messerschmitt 109s are going to have very limited engagement time over the island now, just due to their really poor range.
Yep. And on the 16th of July, as they're withdrawing, that same day, Italian torpedo boats began attacking the HMS Indomitable, while the Dandolo torpedoed the HMS Cleopatra, putting both warships out of action for over a year. On the 17th, Montgomery ordered two brigades of the 50th Division to attack Catania, and 5 days of fighting yielded absolutely no progress, even with the 5th Division attempting to perform a left hook. By the 20th, the 51st Division advanced further west, crossing the Titania River at Sefuro, to assault the Gorbini airfields, but they were repelled by counterattacks the following day. Meanwhile, over on the left flank, the 1st Canadian Division advanced towards Adriano, discovering what was being called the main line. Montgomery then deployed the British 78th Battle Axe Division from his reserves, while Patton reorganized his forces into the U.S. Provisional Corps under Major General Geoffrey Keyes and the U.S. Second Corps under Lieutenant General Omar Bradley. Because at this point, Bradley is under Patton, which, yeah, that'll change.
And in just 1 year, might add.
Yeah, and rightfully so. Bradley was a competent commander. Not to say Patton isn't
Um,
competent, but his emotions.
he's hot-headed.
Yeah.
But I think one way that actually Patton did get permission to move up on Route 120 and such, right?
Yeah.
Was he convinced Alexander that I'm just going to do a reconnaissance in force. That was pretty much how we kind of sold the way to allow the United States armies to move around and deploy on the island.
Yeah. It's something that's repeatedly done. By the 17th, the Provisional Corps captured Agrigento and Port Empedocle. Sorry if I mispronounced that one. While the Second Corps seized Caltanissetta on the 18th, effectively cutting the east-west routes across central Sicily. Now, on the 18th, Patton received orders to move his troops north through Petralia along Route 120, which would be the next east-west lateral. If you're looking at the map, they're basically just going north and cutting specific highways so that the enemy can't use them to travel east or west. More or less, they're traveling east at this point because they're basically, through all the actions the Allies are doing, they're being pushed more and more northeast. Once this was accomplished, Patton would focus on mopping up the western half of Sicily, and he instructed the Second Corps to advance north while the Provisional Corps conducted cleanup operations. Alexander also commanded Patton to send units east to assist the Eighth Army when feasible and to capture Palermo, which would serve as a new main supply base to support future assaults against the main line. On the 21st, the Provisional Corps suffered about 300 casualties, but managed to overrun the Italian battle group Scriba, which was covering the withdrawal of the 15th Panzergrenadier Division. By the 22nd, the Provisional Corps had captured Palermo, and on the 23rd, the U.S. 45th Division cut the North Coast Road. So, now we're coming up to late July. Montgomery is now assembling his forces to attack what is the main line, targeting the sector around Adriano. After this is captured, this would divide the German forces on either side of Mount Etna. So, if you were actually looking at a map of this, Mount Etna sits in the northeastern part of Sicily, and it's very, very large. And basically, the Germans and Italians have heavily fortified the area to make it kind of a bottleneck. You either have to go around it on the left side or on the right side, more or less, so that you can get over to the northeastern part of Sicily. But at this time, something significant was also happening, I guess you could argue, on the mainland. I don't know, Gareth, did you want to explain the situation?
Oh, with pleasure. So we are talking about the downfall of the Duce. Well, one moment, I'll just share without the images. Like so, is the image up?
Just give it a few seconds. There he is. Oh, the beautiful Dolce himself.
Yeah. Now, Italy, when it entered the war in 1940, just really entered opportunistically or out of fear that Germany might retaliate against them for not joining to support. There was a case for both uh, arguments. Now, what ends up happening is since they are quite under-industrialized, even worse in Germany, they have even fewer resources. They're not able to really equip up army despite, and they have a lot of commitments, right? They have hundreds of thousands of soldiers in North Africa and in Greece, etc. And with the lack of men tending to the farms, the harvests have been poor. That I read somewhere that by early 1943, So this is around the time of the Battle of the Kasserine Pass, around that time. So it's late Feb. It was one of the ministers had told Mussolini that, or I think it was Giano, my bad, that he needs to cut the daily rationing. And for the adults, it would be slightly under, like for the adult males. Now it is going to be slightly under 1,000 calories a day. So it's getting pretty bad, especially in the cities. Now, I think by mid-July, even the fascist council had enough. They wanted to get rid of Mussolini and just extricate themselves from the war. Now, there are concerns. They don't know how the Germans will react, and they correctly guess that it's gonna be pretty violent, especially if they decide to take themselves out of the war. Now, what the main thing was they had to convince the king. So even though Mussolini is called the father of fascism and such, he did not have absolute power in his own country like how Hitler did. The king still had a lot of power, and King Vittorio Emmanuel III, who was the current reigning monarch, he was finally convinced as the United States strategic air forces under General Dewey Spaatz started to not only target the Balkans, but they also made raids into the train marshalling yards in Rome and central and northern Italy as well. Luckily, not a lot of the Roman stuff actually got preserved, and I'm quite happy for that, given my love for the ancient Romans. But that was the event that tipped the king of Italy to side with the faction that wanted to get rid of Mussolini. Now, the what happened was Mussolini decided to call a Grand Council vote. Now, the Grand Council, as you can see, this is just like an image here, was a body of around 30 people, and these were all the hand-picked loyal subordinates of Mussolini. And they are the de facto executive of the Italian government. So all the ministries and all the executive roles, their members are here. Now, what happens in the shadows is there is a conspiracy where it is proposed that Pietro Bagdaglio will be made the new prime minister, and they need to have Mussolini arrested. Now, keep in mind that while the Italians are also losing this, suffering this loss of morale, Hitler and the Wehrmacht and the OKWOKH, they're all like, realizing that they are shackled to a corpse, Italy is gonna jump out. But Hitler, while he kind of oscillates between believing it's true, he also has that kind of personal loyalty to Mussolini. And he believes, oh, the Duce is ill, so it's or he's being held hostage against his will. So that's kind of like what is the belief going on with the Führer right now. So around this time, the Germans have already drawn up a few plans to, in the event of Italy's collapse, what they will be doing. I'll get into that in a bit. Now, on 24th of July, now this is the date that is important, Mussolini calls for a Grand Council meeting so that they can discuss the situation of what is going to go on. Now, quite ironically, his wife, she begs him not to go to the Palazzo Venezia today, in Rome that day, because she said something bad is going to happen. They're going to go after you. Please don't go. It's kind of like what Caesar's wife told him on the Ides of March. Well, at least one guy just did not get stabbed.
Not yet.
Not yet, but well, Caesar got stabbed on the day he went, so I'm just comparing it to that. Now, at the Palazzo Venezia, the same place where in June 1940, Mussolini declared Italy is gonna enter the war and create the new Roman Empire.
Spanning the Mediterranean world.
Well, The only thing is the Romans actually made the Mediterranean Mare Nostrum.
Yeah,
It was our sea then, but under Mussolini it was not. It was just the
not so
British.
much.
Anyways, so at 5:14 p.m. the on the 24th of July, the meeting is convened. And keep in mind, one thing is the Vittorio Ambrosio, who is the Comando Supremo. So he is the chief of the Italian military at this point. He's actually stationed three motorized divisions just outside Rome. These are men loyal to the Italian military, and they are prepared to defend the city against fascist supporters of Mussolini or the Germans if they retaliate. So it's quite a, the conspirators are prepared for, violence, retaliation from the power. And it's kind of like how Napoleon took the coup of 18 Brumaire, might add, with the divisions officially there for security, but were actually to kind of intimidate his enemies, anti-Chris. At 5:14, there is the meeting starts, and Mussolini just kind of goes on a rant. Okay, he just speaks non-stop for 2 hours. All right, and then there is debate, and Gardini, who is one member of the Fascist Council, he puts forward a proposal, a vote, right, for these 28 members that are in the council right now. And the vote is for a lot of the powers that Mussolini has as the prime minister equivalent, you could say, to be transferred away from him and to the king. Right. So this is like the legal way to kind of start stripping him of his power and influence. And after a lot of debate between both sides, a vote is put. And it concludes on 25th of July at 3 a.m. with 19 of the 28 members voting for Gardini's proposal, 7 against, and 1 abstained. So it's enough for the vote to be passed. Now, on the 25th of July, in the afternoon, uh, Mussolini goes to meet King Vittorio Emanuele III at Savoia, and at just before 5 p.m., they meet. He tells the king that, yeah, these guys passed this proposal, which is to, transfer power to me from me to you, Your Majesty, but please be assured it has no legal weightage whatsoever, and I will still do my best for Italy. I'm your champion, I'm your guy. And it is at this moment the trap is sprung. The king stops Mussolini from speaking a bit. He says, Italy's on the verge of being ruined, it's on the verge of collapse. There's a broken army, there's no morale, there's no industry, there's nothing. And he says, no one wants to fight, and now they need a new leader. And he said that Mussolini is now going to be removed as prime minister, and Pietro Badoglio will be the new prime minister and in charge. And he says, I'm sorry, there's no other way. And he says, I promise you that you will be safe. And, at that moment, Mussolini is arrested and, driven away from the king's. Well, so this is a big blow. Now, the night of the 25th and 26th, the news reaches the Wehrmacht and Hitler. Now, guess who lost his temper?
Seen Mr. Adolf Hitler.
Yep. And according to him, he claims the Soviets are no longer the greatest enemy of the German people. It is Pietro Badoglio. He's this a horrible, slimy guy. He's this evil guy that's, trying to destroy us and everything. I guess, the race war ideology for Hitler was kind of put on pause for a few days while he was raving and ranting about Badoglio and Italian treachery. Now, it was this event more than anything that convinced the German high command that Sicily is now untenable for them. Otherwise, Kesselring's idea, which even the OKW were fine with, was to hold on to, as you said, let me just show up the map here. the Cantina and Santo Stefano line in the northwest corner, where, as you can see, right, the terrain is much higher than the rest of the island, which naturally favors defense and is going to mitigate Allied air power. And there are closer supplies as Messina can be protected and supplies can be shipped over. But with the fall of the Italian government, they realized that, okay, we cannot keep this. Let's withdraw soldiers from Sicily. So this is one thing that also takes place. Now, Rommel was also given at this time the command of Army Group B. And Hitler also debated about sending three panzer divisions to Rome at this moment. So there are not divisions in Italy right now. And the idea is to arrest the king and the members of the government, but Kesselring kind of tells him not to do anything. And the orders of the Führer are from Sicily, all German troops, especially the Fallschirmjäger and the Hermann Göring Panzer Division, are the priority units that have to be withdrawn. Now, at the same time, the Germans also they launched this Operation Battle Axe. I think it's kind of some. I can't remember the exact German pronunciation, which is German troops are now going to come into Italy and the Balkans and Greece in force and just disarm the Italian armies completely.
In
They don't
German,
trust them.
it's Operation Lehrgang.
Yeah, thank you. Much appreciated. But that is the plan. And Rommel is to be put on standby to take command of Army Group B because prior to his deployment onto the Western Front, as we know for D-Day and such, he was actually supposed to command the army groups in the south, the Southern Front. Now, one more thing is also Hitler finally was talked out of the idea by uh, of launching a coup against the Italian government by Kesselring and a lot of the Wehrmacht senior staff because they just felt it's not worth the risk. And now, without its main ally, Germany was going to fight a losing war on its own. And there's no turning back now. That would be the fall of Italy, Mussolini and fascist Italy.
Yep. And here I'm gonna toss up actually the same map that you did because you're right to show this actually shows the main line properly. Whereas the other map I had it Mount Etna takes too much of it and it kind of doesn't show off where the units are. But yeah, so these developments are significantly impacting the fight in Sicily. For the assault against the main line, the Allies are going to unleash something called Operation Hardgate, which was to be executed by the 30th Corps, supported by about 264 25 pounders and 88 medium guns, which were stockpiled with nearly 150,000 shells, and numerous aircraft would also be bombarding. So they're going to hit the main line very hard. A key position.
Craig,
Yep.
before we get into this, I think let's digress a little bit and talk about the famous OSS mission.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Absolutely.
I yeah. Oh, would you like to go or should I?
Oh, go for it.
Yeah, I think one of the points that we have to mention is the United States has a lot of links with Sicily, right? Basically, the mafia, the men of honor.
Yes.
The Office of the Naval Intelligence has reached out to Lucky Luciano, who's in jail. And keep in mind, the guy is so influential that he's still running his criminal enterprise while in jail. And they say they'll give a pardon, and he needs to help them, use the mafia in Sicily, which are dormant, and help the Italian troops just wither away. You know, the idea was just to convince them to desert.
One thing that the
And he,
mafia did that actually helped the Allies a lot in Sicily was uncovering where the headquarters were, because obviously the enemy hides their headquarters. So in Palermo, for example, the mafia specifically helped them discover all the headquarters, where the weapons were stockpiled, and they did not like full-blown sabotage, but they did sabotage quite a bit of things as they could, and they got a lot of the Italian military personnel to just be like, yeah, we're not going to fight. So they got a lot of guys to stand down.
Yeah, and it's quite easy with Italians convincing other Italians versus say American or British agent.
Mhm.
But this was a route used by the Office of Naval Intelligence and the Navy.
Mhm.
This was not what the OSS did. So there was Max Corvo. He was of Sicilian descent, wanted to fight back against the fascists, and he wanted to help in Messina, right, where he came from, with Italians, uh, to rise up. And he had written a paper which seemed to get a lot of support from some pretty high-ranking generals, and that's how the mission got the green signal to go ahead. And this mission is nothing short of a comedy. With He's to leave the United States on mainland on the 20th of May, 1943. But as he takes off, his air, air transport develops problems, and they have to land in Dutch Guinea for repairs, and that's delayed him for a week. He reaches Algiers on the 20th of May, and he and his boss, Colonel William Eddy, spend the next 6 weeks getting ready to train their agents and such, who will be, the idea is they will land with the first waves of soldiers, probably like, just after the paratroopers drop those first waves, and with false documents, civilian clothes, etc., maps of Italy stashed with them, Sicily, so that they can, move into the hinterland and convince the Italians to do just what the mafia did. Now, unfortunately, these intelligence officers did not really seem to have a good grasp of timing. And on 8th of July, they leave North Africa, reach Malta, where the invasion fleet was supposed to take them.
Psst. Hey you ever hear me talk about some great Pacific War movie or documentary like Pearl Harbor Minute by Minute over on Netflix and feel the urge to watch it for yourself?
Uh-oh, you live in Japan, and your Netflix doesn't have it? Must suck to be you.
Sucks to be me right now.
Oh wow, season 4 of Demon Slayer is out. Oh wait, I can't watch it on Canadian Netflix, but it's over on Japan Netflix? Whatever will I do?
Oh no, no.
Being blocked from regional content? With private internet access, you too can watch Demon Slayer Season 4 by switching your IP address to Japan.
Yes! Hell yeah!
Why stop with Japan? With private internet access, you can change your IP address to over 84 different countries and every single US state, giving you access to region-restricted content all over the world.
Nice.
Many websites and services like Netflix are only accessible depending on your physical location, but private internet access helps you overcome these restrictions. Think about it. Without private internet access, it's like paying for a TV series and missing out on the latest season. Shots fired, Demon Slayer on Canadian Netflix.
Is that like a personal attack or something?
Ever fear people are gonna find your Google searches?
Banzai! Banzai! Banzai!
FBI, open up!
Private internet access makes sure that those Google searches remain a buried secret, as private internet access encrypts your internet access and has a no logs policy. Think you're safe with the local coffee shop's free Wi-Fi? No, you are certainly not. Private internet access gives you more privacy features than any other software and real-time protection from malware and trackers, giving you peace of mind knowing those Google searches remain seen by you and you alone. Private internet access has a no-log policy that they've defended in court, which means they are not storing any of your browsing data. Hey, are you like me using different devices under one household? Private internet access is available on all platforms and protects an unlimited amount of devices at the same time. I personally use private internet access to unblock movies and TV series from all across the globe, and I sleep easier writing scripts for my YouTube channel and others knowing my data is secure. Look, this is a no-brainer. Sign up with my link in the description of this video to get 83% off, plus 4 months for free, so it ends up being only around $2 per month. Signing up for private internet access is risk-free. There's a 30-day money-back guarantee, and 24/7 customer support is available. So don't forget to click www.piavpn.com/the Pacific War Channel, and a big thanks to Private Internet Access for sponsoring this video.
And on 9th July, they come to Malta. They, walk into the harbor, strutting along with their group, and they're like, "Okay, guys, tell us which landing craft is supposed to board, as we are going to go and help our great cause. The shipmasters are like, the invasion fleet's already set sail. And they are completely uh, worried because this is not going to derail their entire operation, right? If you want to spread the descent, it's better you get in with the first waves and quickly go behind enemy lines to start sowing descent. And according to Corvo, he just doesn't know what's going on because he believes that we have approval from everybody. Everyone wants us to do this, but yet we can't do anything. Maybe you guys should actually plan your intelligence properly and your dates. Now, on 13th July, they board LST and finally land on Sicily. And as you know, by 13th July, most of the Allied forces have successfully landed. The airfield repairs have started. And, like the generals themselves have set up their HQs on the island by now. And they land and they are told that they will be able to talk to General Terry Allen, who currently commands the Big Red One, the United States 1st Division, which is under Bradley's 2nd Corps. And they said he will be able to help. And by 14th July, when they land, they are unable to find the 7th Army HQ, right, where they think they might be able to find Terry Allen. And at this time, Patton has begun his drive to the west of the island. So they also go. And instead of beelining straight for Patton, they find a castle on the coast. And they decide, hey, let's take the opportunity to sightsee. And after sightseeing that castle, Corvo decides that he needs to requisition this castle for himself and his men. And it's a bit strange that a lieutenant, in the presence of a colonel and another captain with him, he's requisitioning the castle over them. It's a bit unorthodox. Now they reach the town of Licata, which is on the coast on the map. And they have to meet the G2 of the 7th Army, Colonel Oscar Cook. He's like the head of the 7th Army's intelligence. And, they think he'll take them to Patton. But guess what they decided to do first? They find an open barber and cafe. And so it's delayed. Now, Oscar Koch had very little enthusiasm. And he just kind of pushes them on to someone else. And, even the Corvo was saying, no, I'm from Melili. I have a lot of connections and everything. And Koch just says, just go there. But the problem is where Koch had suggested for them to go is somewhere around here in the central eastern part of Sicily, which is under 8th Army control and not the United States. So there's not going to be anyone for them to go. And you can't even fault the 7th Army's officers for taking these guys as a joke. They are intelligence officers who are not seeming to have much grasp of their intelligence picture of what they need to do, when they need to go, etc. Now, at the same time, the OSS's mission, they landed with the first waves, moved back, made contact with the mafia, and well, the rest is history with what the naval intelligence did. But yeah, I guess this was just a amusing thing for this mission.
Yeah, it certainly is. So where I had left off, Operation Hardgate was going to be executed by the 30th Corps, supported by 264 25-pounders and 88 medium guns, which had stockpiled about 150,000 shells, and there's also going to be some aircraft bombardment. This is going to be directed against the main line, and also the southern outpost of Atrano, which held the village of Centeripe, situated atop some steep hills, making it nearly impregnable. The surrounding smaller hills were also heavily defended, necessitating their capture before a direct assault could be laid against Etrupe. And the position was being defended at that time by the 3rd Fallschirmjäger Regiment, supported by some artillery and several tanks. Major General Vivian Evenlay's 78th Battle Axe Division was going to be assigned with the task of capturing Centripe, and they would begin their march on the night of the 29th, coinciding with the 3rd Canadian Brigade's capture of Setenova, which would establish a bridgehead across the Detano River. Evelay ordered his 38th Brigade to assault Centripe under some artillery support, with one unit flanking to attack the rear. Actually, I'm going to change my map. I think I have a specific map for this one. This is the drive against Adrano, Agria. This is close to the area, I believe, but I don't know if it shows. No, I'll keep the other map for now. That'll be in the future. Again, folks, if you have a chance, check us out on YouTube. We have a lot of visuals. So that would establish a bridgehead across the Ditano River. Now, at noon on August the 2nd, the 2nd Battalion of the London Irish Rifles initiated their assault on the commanding hills overlooking Centripe, and these would be points 704, 611, and 703. Bombardments from their 25-pounders preceded the attack, as companies G and F successfully seized points 704 and 703. However, at point 611, it was proving pretty hard. The enemy was holding out, prompting Evelay to order his 1st Battalion of the Royal Irish Fusiliers to storm the rear of Centripe, while the 6th Battalion of the Royal Inskilling Fusiliers ascended a 100-foot cliff to secure a foothold on the southern edge of the village. The Royal Irish Fusiliers knocked out 2 Panzer IIIs with some anti-tank rifles as they engaged in house-to-house and street fighting against German paratroopers and German snipers. Additional forces from the 38th Irish Brigade also arrived to assist the assault. The Germans then launched one unsuccessful counterattack before ultimately surrendering Centripe on August the 3rd. The capture would threaten both Adrano and Catania, leading to the collapse of the main line and prompting Axis forces to retreat to a secondary line closer to Etna, which is called the Etna Line. And this would run from San Fratello through Troina and Adorno. Now, I just want to pull up a new map of Troina. Here we are. Now, by July the 31st, Patton felt confident enough to support eastward operations. More or less, he just wanted a piece of the action. He wanted to fight. And he ordered the U.S. 1st and 9th Divisions to attack Troina. This town was considered one of the main anchors of the new Etna Line, defended by the 15th Panzergrenadier Division and 4 battalions of the 28th Osta Division. For about 6 days, the U.S. 1st Division, aided by some elements of the U.S. 9th Division, a French Moroccan infantry battalion, 165 artillery pieces, and numerous aircraft would assault Troina. Now, on the first day of battle, Sergeant Gary Kisters' men would be silencing 2 machine gun nests, and he would earn a Medal of Honor for his bravery. So I actually have his citation. I'll just read it to you. On July the 31st, 1943, near Gagliano, Sicily, a detachment of 1 officer and 9 enlisted men, including Sergeant Kisters, advanced ahead of the leading elements of the U.S. troops to fill a large crater in the only available vehicle route through Gagliano. They were taken under fire by 2 enemy machine guns. Sergeant Kisters and the officer, unaided in the face of intense small arms fire, advanced to the nearest machine gun emplacement and succeeded in capturing the gun and its crew of 4. Although the greater part of the remaining small arms fire was now directed on the captured machine gun position, Sergeant Kisters voluntarily advanced alone towards the second gun emplacement. While creeping forward, he was struck 5 times by enemy bullets, receiving wounds in both legs and his right arm. Despite the wounds, he continued to advance on the enemy and captured the second machine gun after killing 3 of its crew and forcing the 4th member to flee. The courage of this soldier and his unhesitating willingness to sacrifice his life, if necessary, served as an inspiration to the command. So it's quite an act of heroism. After this,
I'll just say this. All these, when you read the deeds of guys who won the Victoria Cross, Medal of Honor, it's a mix of like insanity, bravery, courage, heroism, glory seeking. It's kind of like an entire
Oh yeah.
Mixture of those, um, emotions and traits.
Actually, I'll say it here. If audience members haven't checked it out yet, I did a interview which turned into a documentary with Dave Holland, and it was titled "Medals of Honor Earned on Guadalcanal" for the ground forces. So he literally just told the story of every single Medal of Honor earned by the men who fought on the ground. And what's unique about the episode is Dave himself, a U.S. Marine, he actually has lived and worked on Guadalcanal for many years. He does tours, and he privately goes around Guadalcanal finding the locations where these Medal of Honors were earned. And no one else has really done this. He just does this on his lonesome, and he's actually uncovered a lot of relics while doing so. He thinks he actually found some pretty unique things that no other historian has ever found. It's a very interesting feat. He has his own YouTube channel, Guadalcanal Walking a Battlefield. It's a fantastic channel, and he himself is a Marine. He has the training. He actually trains Australian forces at the moment, and he knows from A to Z everything you would need to know, and he could explain everything at the top of his head. He doesn't do he doesn't do anything with notes. So when he did the 2 hour podcast with me, where he basically recounted the entire Guadalcanal campaign, he just did it off the top of his head. It's very impressive. I highly recommend checking him out, but I desist. The surrounding hilltops allowed the Axis forces to launch over 2 dozen counterattacks upon the American positions. Now, by August the 7th, the U.S. 18th Regiment captured Mount Pellegrino, which overlooks Troina, providing essential artillery observation. The defenders' left flank became exposed as the adjacent Hermann-Göring division was pushed back by the British 30th Corps. Concurrently, the U.S. 26th Regiment, supported by 5 artillery battalions, outflanked Troina by capturing Mount Basilio on August the 4th, effectively cutting off the Axis line of retreat. For 2 days, the Americans atop Mount Basilio repelled counterattacks, during which Private James W. Reese was killed while taking out a German machine gun, and he would be posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor as well. So I'm going to actually read his citation as well. For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of life, above and beyond the call of duty in action involving actual conflict with the enemy. When the enemy launched a counterattack which threatened the position of his company, Private Reese, as the acting squad leader of a 60-man motor squad, displayed superior leadership of his own initiative, maneuvering his squad forward to a favorable position, which, by skillfully directing the fire of his weapon, he caused many casualties in the enemy ranks, and he aided materially in repulsing the counterattack. When the enemy fire became so severe as to make his position untenable, he ordered the other members of his squad to withdraw to safer positions, but declined to seek safety for himself. So as to bring more effective fire upon the enemy, Private Reese, without assistance, moved his motor to a new position and attacked an enemy machine gun nest. He only had 3 rounds of ammunition, but secured a direct hit with his last round, completely destroying the nest and killing the occupants. Ammunition being exhausted, he abandoned the motor, seized a rifle, and continued to advance, moving into an exposed position overlooking the enemy. Despite a heavy concentration of machine gun, motor, and artillery fire, the heaviest experienced by his unit throughout the entire Sicilian campaign, he remained at his position and continued to inflict casualties upon the enemy until he was killed. His bravery, coupled with his gallant and unswerving determination to close with the enemy, regardless of consequences and obstacles which he faced, are a priceless inspiration to our armed forces. So, yet again, a extremely heroic act. Likewise, a bit crazy, but he earned that posthumous Medal of Honor. Now, on the night of August the 5th, the Germans had actually evacuated Troina, as they were being forced to withdraw towards Randazza, which would be pursued by the U.S. 9th Division. Meanwhile, and I'm just going to go pull back my other map again. Oh, whoops. Yeah, this one right here. Meanwhile, the U.S. 3rd Division launched an assault on San Fratello against the 29th Panzergrenadier Division and the 26th Assietta Division. The Americans made repeated attacks beginning on August the 3rd, but initially failed to gain any ground. Major General Lucien Truscott, who's going to become quite famous later on, then ordered 2 battalions to seize a key hill along the San Fratello line and performed an amphibious outflanking maneuver behind San Fratello at Santa Agata. This maneuver caught the Germans by complete surprise, allowing the Americans to quickly establish a roadblock at Santa Agata, prompting the Germans to withdraw during the night of August the 8th, without warning the Italians they were doing so. 1,000 Italians were taken prisoner, as the Americans then seized San Fratello. So, with this, the Etna line was completely collapsing. Axis forces were being pulled back now to the new Hube line. Exploiting this retreat, the 8th Corps seized Catania on August the 5th. The 51st Highland Division captured Biancavilla on the 6th. The 78th Battle Axe Division took Adrano and Bronte on the 8th, while the 9th Division captured Cesaro and Adazio on the 13th. At this point, the Axis
I
commanders.
think,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, I think I just want to take the 25th July, there was a big conference that happened in Palermo between Montgomery and
Mhm.
Patton, which also involved Eisenhower and Walter Badel. Sorry, not Eisenhower. Harold Alexander and Walter Badel Smith, Eisenhower's chief of staff. Now, it was at this conference where Harold Alexander also landed, and they were to plan the closing parts of the campaign, where it is finally allocated that the British Army will move up from the east, and the United States will now move from the north, heading east, right, to drive to Messina. And the plan was actually formalized by 25th. And the funny thing was, Montgomery and Patton have their BFF moment
I
when
have to
they had
just
this conference.
say to the audience, Garov has used artificial intelligence to create a photo of Patton and Montgomery shaking hands. It's a joke. It's an actual photo, but yeah.
It's an actual photo, but I guess we gotta love their personalities. Now, after the plans were agreed, because Alexander and Generals Walter Badel Smith had really nothing to say, they said, go on. Patton writes in his diary that because they had Montgomery and Patton kind of just were in a car and they just made all the plans looking over a map. And she's like, that guy did not offer me a drink. He did not offer me a lunch. Like, what is this guy, man? And that really pissed off Patton. Now, at the same time, one of the key requests from Patton was he wanted naval and amphibious support. Harold Alexander said he'll do the best he can to provide it, and Patton again in his diary is like, "Yep, this guy's not going to give me shit. He's not going to give anything," because a lot of the transports and LSTs had already been withdrawn, as they needed to be urgently repaired and refit because quite a few of them will be heading towards the English Channel, and the rest have to be ready for transporting the army into the Italian mainland. But keep in mind, Alexander does give eight warship group, which consists about 2 cruisers and 6 destroyers to support Patton's amphibious operations that would take place in July, as you can see here. But because of the limited number of LSTs, which are not even at Alexander's disposal, just enough was given to transport a battalion at a time. Now, the funny thing was in early August, I think Montgomery flies over to Palermo to confer with Patton again on plans. And it is here that Montgomery, one moment, do I have that? Montgomery crashes a B-17 because the airstrip at Palermo was not ready, and there had to be an emergency maneuver, which the pilot applied the brakes, but unfortunately it had to turn on its axis too hard and it fell, and the aircraft was a write-off. And Montgomery just gets off completely, he's not even bothered. And this aircraft was actually a gift slash reward from Eisenhower because of a bet they made during the North African campaign, where Eisenhower jokingly told Montgomery that if he could capture the town of Sfax by April 15th, 1943, he's going to give him a B-17. And the thing is, Eisenhower meant it as a joke. But to Montgomery, it's like, you've told it. I'm taking it as face value. He captures the town on 10th. So Eisenhower presented it. It's kind of hoping that Montgomery will just say, I'll take it and then symbolically return it. Montgomery's like, all right, thank you very much. This is now my personal transport. And that really kind of pissed off Eisenhower and Patton, because Patton was like, how dare this guy get an American plane
Yeah.
when I have to kind of like, beg for transport to take me around? And Eisenhower was kind of pissed off because of the losses being sustained in the air war. Just
Mhm.
losing one B-70 just for a guy's chauffeuring was kind of like not
Yeah.
good.
Not a good look.
Yeah. The funny thing was when they come here, like, like when he lands at Palermo, Patton wants to one-up Montgomery in this meeting. And so he puts like an entire military band, guard of honor for the general of an army, like what he would deserve, has a really lavish lunch and everything. And he tells in his diary, yep, I really one-upped them. I showed him. I'm sorry, Patton, but I don't think Montgomery ever would have perceived it as such. It's actually funny because the subordinates actually got along pretty well. So there
Like,
was
yeah,
the
they're normal people. Like, yeah.
one moment, I need to show this. Is the map visible?
Yep.
I think at one point when there was a redeployment of the 30th Corps and 2nd Corps forces, which involved the movement of the Canadian division, right? So the Canadians had to move from the British sector to the American sector. The British were allocated the use of Highway 120 for the duration, which really pissed off Bradley because he wanted to move his divisions around at that time. But it turns out it was actually just like some staff error which led to the miscommunication on the days and such. And Bradley did not know about that, and he sends a really strongly worded message to General Sir Oliver Leese, commander of 30th Corps, that Oliver Leese actually comes to Bradley's headquarters and apologizes in person and explains what happened. And Bradley was actually feeling quite bad because he realized that it's nothing like ego or anything. It was just like some error that got missed in staff work and such. And they just like, had some drinks together and they're like, they're not going to have a bad relationship like their bosses. I'll just leave it there.
Well, all right. I'm gonna pull back up the map. Now, at this point, looking at actually a few days prior, July the 27th, Axis commanders realized that the evacuation of Sicily was inevitable. So on July the 29th, Kesselring had notified Hitler and initiated a partial withdrawal that was beginning on about August the 1st to the 10th, during which 12,000 men, 4,500 vehicles, and 5,000 tons of supplies were transported back to mainland Italy. On the 11th, a full-scale evacuation, codenamed Operation Lehrgang, began involving successive withdrawals of units that would advance about 8 to 24 kilometers while keeping the Allied forces at bay. Generals Patton and Montgomery both aimed to be the first to reach Messina, so we're looking at an identical situation to what had happened in Tunisia, igniting a race between their forces. The Allies were unable to effectively use naval or air power to disrupt the evacuation, as the narrow strait of Messina was heavily defended by artillery, including 120 heavy and 112 light anti-aircraft guns.
Do you mind if I just add a bit
Yeah.
more details about the evacuation plan?
Yeah, go for it.
So it was actually Kesselring that communicated to Hitler that we are going to evacuate successfully in 3 days. However, the evacuation planning and such was placed under the command of General Hubert, and he wanted a more planned, methodical approach. So he said, I'll need a minimum of 5 days for the evacuation to take place. And as you can see, how the on the map where the Axis defense lines are being pushed back, one of the things was as he was also narrowing his front and withdrawing in planned stages, utilizing the natural terrain to its maximum effectiveness, so that the number of men required to man the line will always decrease. So he can maintain the same level of force while the rest get transported onto the mainland. And as you said, the strait was so heavily defended that the Allies did not go for low fighter sweeps. There were so many AA guns, it was just too risky. They had to go for high level bombing attacks, which are not going to be very accurate. And there's no way the strait was too guarded for warships to not even. It is not even on the table, right? No one's even going to suggest it. And that was one of the key planning tenets that he would go with. And it was a very organized retreat that he conducted, because he said no one is going to move, like no man will be transported across the island during the day hours. During the day, maybe I will allow equipment to get transported across the various barges, but no man. All soldiers were and personnel were transported during the night. And while it's not going to be visible here, a lot of different landing beaches on the mainland were used, so that the barges, the same unit, like one battalion of, say, the Hermann Göring Panzer Division, will not be landed together. So that this is kind of like dispersing the wave, so that there's no juicy or lucrative target for the Allied air forces to, go over. So I think this is just like a detail I just wanted to add.
Yeah, of
the
course.
level of planning.
And as you mentioned, so there, Hubei and his teams are going to be successfully delaying the Allied advance by employing mines, demolishing bridges, leveraging natural obstacles, doing whatever they have to. By August the 15th, the 8th Army won the race, prompting Patton to order an amphibious operation. On the 16th, British forces were halted by a blown bridge at Termesteri, while Patton from the U.S. 3rd Division was poised to enter Messina. However, Patton issued strict orders to hold the troops back. And at 10 a.m. on August 17th, he personally led an American column into the city, where he received the formal surrender from the Italian mayor. It's the most Patton-ass thing you've ever heard. And
I mean, come on, the guy was a glory hunter, glory seeker.
absolutely. And basically, with that, that's the end of the it's the conquest of Sicily. There's actually various units that are trapped behind Allied lines, mostly Italian, but they're just going to give themselves up over time. Overall, the capture of Sicily resulted in significant losses for the Axis forces. They had suffered about 9,000 deaths, 40,000 missing, 46,000 wounded, 120,000 or so captured. In contrast, the Allies suffered about 5,837 deaths, almost 16,000 wounded, and about 3,300 were captured. Codenamed Operation Husky was ultimately a success. However, by the 18th of August, the Axis had successfully evacuated about 135,000 troops, 135 pieces of artillery, nearly 15,000 vehicles, 47 tanks, and about 1,100 tons of ammunition, alongside 20,000 tons of other supplies. The operation was also, I have to mention this because I think no one ever talks about this, was marred by war crimes committed by Allied forces against civilians. There was reports emerging of brutal killings, notable massacres occurring in places like Vittoria, Agrigento, and Canicati. In addition, there was, of course, widespread looting, which is the norm, numerous reports of rape and other acts of sexual violence, and many prisoners of war were executed. Notably by Canadians. Canadians have a tendency to kill POWs. That's another thing no one talks about. Yeah, look it up. In World War One, we got in a lot of shit for that. Italian statistic.
Well, that's why they say the Geneva Conventions were only made to counter the Canadians.
Exactly, that's where it comes from. Italian statistics report a number of rapes were actually committed by American and Free French forces. So, there's people blaming each other. According to one historian, Clive Emsley, the record books of the British Special Investigation Branch recorded a few instances of rape and sexual harassment involving British service members during the invasion.
Obviously underplayed.
Of course. On July the 19th, just over a week after the Allied landings, Captain Angelo Thomas Sizia, a Canadian Army officer in the 1st Canadian Division, recorded that fellow Canadian troops were involved in a number of unsettling incidents. That's a quotation, including looting, shooting at civilians, and one gang rape in Piazza Armerina. Now, according to Mitcham and von Stauffenberg, Canadian troops of the Loyal Edmonton Regiment similarly executed German prisoners of war during the invasion, which I'm going to say, yeah, that probably happened. On July the 14th, American troops of the 180th Infantry Regiment similarly executed 73 Axis prisoners of war in 2 separate incidents. After capturing about 45 Italian and 3 German POWs while attacking an airfield near Santo Pietro, a regimental detachment led by one Sergeant Horace T. West marched the POWs for approximately a mile in a western direction, as West directed 8 or 9 of them to be separated from the rest, taken to the regimental intelligence officer for some questioning. He then proceeded to execute the remaining 37 POWs, and on the next day, the 37 bodies were spotted by American military chaplain Lieutenant Colonel William King. King reported the incident to his superiors, who at first dismissed it due to, obviously, the bad press that would occur if it was to be made public. However, after some convincing, they agreed to court-martial West. Troops from the 180th Infantry Regiment committed another massacre on July the 14th when Captain John C. Compton ordered 35 Italian POWs to be executed by firing squad. So, yeah, that is stuff that no one talks about. The Allied
And I
war
think a
crimes are
lot
underplayed.
of yeah, and I think a lot of the issues is these guys actually see their buddies get killed, like their
Exactly. Yeah,
friends,
exactly.
and that is because see, most of the soldiers are just men who want to fight for the country, but they're not going to show too much initiative.
Yep.
As in the first episode, I categorized the soldiers are like from A, B, C, D. A being the highly motivated, initiative men. These are the guys who will be in the paratroopers, for example, like
Yeah.
the best of the best. And category B being like the officers and such, right? They don't want to be there more than anyone else, but they will look out for their men. They will lead them and do more. They'll go the extra mile. Most are in C, which are just like they just want to be there, but they want to survive.
Exactly.
Like they just want to do the bare minimum. But most of these guys would have been in C. They're not like gung ho for the war, but you see your friends die in front of you. The only way you can just kind of like I guess gain that vengeance or retribution is taking it out on the POWs.
Yeah, I can give one example. During the Battle of Hong Kong, there were positions manned by British Canadian forces who were clearly they were surrounded, they were going to lose their positions, but they would expend all of their ammunition before actually like putting up a white flag and leaving. So ironically, take it from the Japanese point of view. That's kind of funny to say because the Japanese are the most egregious for performing massacres. The Japanese would look and they would be shocked because not only is the enemy surrendering, but they had just unloaded all of their ammunition, killing like a lot of them in the process. So it was kind of not to say it's needless, but I guess from the Japanese point of view, it would be considered a bit scumbag to do so. And the Japanese were more inclined to execute their POWs as a result. Vice versa, this happens, that's like a normal situation in war.
I actually remember reading this in D-Day where some Germans manning the what do you call it? Like the Atlantic Wall
The
defenses
Atlantic Wall,
in
yeah.
front of Omaha.
Mhm.
This guy, he was part of a group that they fired a lot of machine gun bullets from their entrenched machine gun to the point that the gun was made inoperable just due to the heat.
Yeah, it busted, yeah.
And then he said that the private, right? He says, I'm just going to surrender. I can't do this anymore and all, right? So he's already been under that stress.
Yeah.
And I think one of his comments is, after all the machine gun rounds you fired, there's no way the Americans are going to be nice to you.
Oh, yeah.
And I actually read this. I think the Sherwood Rangers, which is the British armored regiment that serves
Mhm.
with the 8th Army in North Africa, and they also go into D-Day. At one point, I think this was just before the breakout of Normandy, a group of Tiger tanks ambush the Rangers, and about 12 of the Shermans are killed. Crews are killed and their tanks destroyed. And the men are pretty pissed off because some of the members who died from that regiment in that attack were like, the very popular sergeants and all. Like, they might have just been privates or corporals, but everyone will know about them.
Yeah.
The major, when they later captured the same Germans a bit later, because the Tigers were quite mechanically unreliable,
Yeah.
it reached a point that the men wanted to execute them. But he managed to actually hold off his men. And even though he said, I did want to do it myself, pull the trigger on them, he held off, and he did also threaten his own men that you guys do anything, I'm going to shoot you myself.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of willpower also for even an officer to say that, especially since it's one thing if it's like a general like Patton or Montgomery just saying, oh, such things happen. But it's something for, like, say, a major or a captain to make this decision because they're going to be in the front.
Yeah.
They might see it happen right away.
And yeah.
I'll just add one thing. While we talked about these war crimes and such, there were also some humanitarian, or I will just say like peaceful truce, global
Of course.
truce
Yeah,
incidents
of
that did
course.
take place. So I think this one was, I think this was in the early landings. A group of the Tiger tanks, one Tiger company, right, which came with 17 tanks, and by now there are only 2 left. So the commander of the company, he sends his men to one abandoned house to see if they can find water to put in those jerry cans so that they can come back. And his men don't return for like a couple of hours. So he's like, what the hell? He goes, and then when he comes to that house, his men and the American soldiers there are just chatting away.
Yeah.
All right. And then his men explained that when they came, they already knew the Americans were there. So they're about to come with their pistols, like, storming it. And just as they're about to open the door opens, and the American officer is already having his revolver pointed at them. But no one really pulls the pistol, even though both have their guns drawn. And they kind of agree to like a truce. And, they are sharing wine, food, cigarettes. And the Americans do allow the Germans to fill their jerry cans with water. And funny thing was, they both also found out they are from similar numbers. So the men of the Germans were from the 504th Panzer Battalion, and the Americans were from the 504th Parachute Regiment, the
That's
PIR.
coincidence, yeah.
And that kind of was like a way to, unify. Now, ultimately, the truce does not last long. The American officer asks if he can radio for a Red Cross operator to come and take the wounded. The German officer agrees, but first he points his guns at the house from the tanks, so that in case they breach the truce, he's ready to fire.
Yeah.
And, there was a 6-hour truce, and at the end, the Germans just withdraw from their lines. And while a medevac officer did come, and he did also tell the Germans to surrender, but they did not. I don't know, it's just like small bits of humanitarian acts, I could call them, in the midst of the war. It really is like a bright spot in a way.
Yeah, of course. But to finish this all off, obviously, the conquest of Sicily, it marks a critical turning point in World War II. Mussolini has also fallen. And it's just a matter of time before the new Bagliio's new regime seeks peace with the Allies, because obviously Italy's going to seek peace. Hitler has completely lost his faith in his Italian allies' ability to resist the enemy, and he's going to be forced to cancel a major offensive at Kursk as a result, diverting a fifth of the German army to southern Europe, now because he has to cover this corridor. And the Allies have gained complete control over the Mediterranean Sea now, and they're establishing a perfect launching pad, Sicily, for the invasion of mainland Italy. So that's
Can we
going to be
not
coming
just
up.
talk about the fact that the Mediterranean is now safe for passage?
Yeah.
how quickly supplies are going to be moving from theaters.
Yeah. I mean, it is over for the Axis, but they're going to continue this downward spiral to the very end, taking more lives. But before we let the audience off, I just want to remind everybody, if you'd like to further support this channel, please consider checking out the YouTube membership or the Patreon account at www.patreon.com/the Pacific War Channel. By joining either of these, you get access to the exclusive podcast series, early access to all the content we make, and voting rights for the subjects that we will tackle next. Probably the Italian campaign, which I don't know how many episodes that's going to be. Could be 10 episodes, could be more. We'll find out soon enough. But Gaurav, thank you for joining me on this one, and until next time.
My pleasure. And looking forward to what we have next for our listeners.
Over and out.